idea where to start.
We're going to walk you through the process from start to finish.
The first steps in purchasing a home is you really want to find a good agent to work with. So you want to find an agent who you kind of like their style. It's someone that you know, you like, and you trust. This person is going to walk you through everything, all the steps of buying a house. So you're going to be spending a lot of time with them. So that's why you definitely want to have someone that you like and someone that you trust. This is going to be a huge purchase, possibly the biggest purchase of your entire life. So you want someone who knows what they're doing, who knows how to write a competitive contract, who knows what to look at for in homes, any like defects that a home might have. You want to have an agent that can really guide you through the way so you know that you are making a good purchase and going to be in a home you're going to be happy with for a long time. Once you've picked an agent, like me, a good step to take is to get pre-approved with a lender.
The lending perspective, I would say, is very similar to what Jessica discussed as far as choosing your lender, somebody that you work well with, somebody you like. I mean, you do spend a lot of time with them through the process. We might email you every day there for a little while. Sometimes your realtor will give you some lender recommendations. You can also ask friends and family or use somebody that you already know that you would like to work with. And so the first step on the lending side of things is to fill out a loan application. So that is the very first step in seeing what you will be pre-qualified for, how much your payments are going to be, what kind of loan programs you're going to be qualified for. The first step to get all of that information is to fill out a loan application, which you can do on my website. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes. So once you've fully filled out your loan application and we have any necessary documents from you, we will let you know what you're pre-qualified for, go over loan terms with you, go over your payment, your interest rate, how much money you'll need down at the closing table. All of those things will be discussed. So then you're technically pre-qualified or pre-approved depending on how much documentation you provide. And at that point, we really just kind of tell borrowers that they are free to go start looking for houses.
Well, once you get pre-approved, we can start the house shopping, which is probably some of the most exciting part. Once you're pre-approved, you'll have a budget. So we know where to look at. So this is another thing that's important to communicate with your agent so they know. As an agent, I prefer to show people after they've been pre-approved, because imagine, say you fall in love with homes in the $300,000 price range and then you're only qualified for $250,000. It's kind of a bummer to do it that way, so it's kind of backwards. So we just really prefer for clients to be pre-approved so we know exactly where to look, what price range, and that gives us some good direction to go off of. And we start looking. As your agent, I might send you options, or you might be getting on, hopefully my website, but maybe Zillow or Realtor.com, finding options and sending those to your agent. As an agent, yes, I see everything that comes on the market, but I'm not constantly on there. I'm out doing showings and having other meetings as well. So I can't be constantly, scouring the internet for homes for you. So you might see some that I haven't noticed. So you'll just send those to your agent, to me. Then your agent will get them scheduled for you, and then we'll go and check them out. So some things that you might want to think about before you start home shopping is kind of have a want and needs list in your mind, or you can even write it down. And I have a sheet that I can provide you with. If you want that, just contact me and using the information below, and I will get that to you. But you might want to think about, what kind of home do you want? Do you want just a single family home, or are you interested in a condo or a townhouse? Maybe you want a duplex to have some income producing options. You kind of need to decide what kind of home you want, and then what kind of condition. Do you want it to be completely turnkey and move-in ready? Are you okay with a little bit of a fixer-upper? Are you willing to take on a complete huge project? You also want to think about how many bedrooms you need, how many bathrooms. Is a basement important to you? Is a yard important to you? Do you need a fenced-in yard? Fencing in a yard is always an option, but you might want something that's already fenced so you don't have to deal with that burden of fencing it in later. Other things to think about are, is there a desired location? Is there a certain school district maybe you want your kids to grow up in, or you want to be close to work? Maybe you want to be close to university, and so you want to be within a 15-minute drive to work. Those are just all important things to consider when thinking, where does your next home land? So after looking at sometimes at one home, sometimes it's tons of homes, it might take 6 months or a year to find that perfect home. But once you do find the home that you love, we will be ready to make an offer. So I'm gonna let Zoe talk a little bit about what happens when you get to that point.
Typically during the house shopping process, you might get with your lender, text them, email them, whatever, and say, look, I like these few houses. Can you give me an updated fee worksheet or loan breakdown for these different houses, these different price points. And we're happy to give as many of those as you would like throughout the process. And then once you've found the house that you actually do want to make an offer on, typically either the agent or you as the buyer would come to your lender and ask for a pre-qualification or pre-approval letter. So that usually is accompanied with your offer that your realtor sends to the person that has the house listed. So we can give you a letter that basically states you're pre-approved for this loan, here are the loan terms, and just kind of lets the seller know that you're serious, that you do have financing in place for whenever you do get under contract on that home. And once you have your pre-qualification letter or pre-approval letter, then you would get back with Jessica and officially write the offer on the house.
When we're at the point where we're ready to make an offer, there are a couple things that I want to go over. I'm going to help you write an offer, and I'm very good at writing competitive offers. A few things that I always have to know is how much money can you put down for earnest money. Earnest money is basically a deposit. It's a good faith deposit. When you're making an offer on a house, you're saying, I really like this house, depending on the price of the home, but typically somewhere around 1%. Really give or take, depending on how aggressive you want the offer to be and how much interest you want to show. And this is just a deposit towards my closing costs.
As a credit on your closing statement. So your earnest money is technically a credit there at the end. You've already paid it. Obviously, you've written the check with Jessica, but then it'll show on your closing statement for the loan as a credit, $5,000 or whatever it is, off of your total amount needed.
And I don't like this to scare people because, we go under contract, they accept our offer, and you've paid this $5,000 earnest money, and then you go through inspections, and there are just major issues. Like maybe there had been a fire that wasn't disclosed, and so the attic has a lot of issues, or maybe there needs to be a new furnace or a complete HVAC overhaul. If those things do occur and you decide, this is just too much of a project for me, and maybe the sellers aren't willing to negotiate, we can back out. We can retract our offer and have a mutual release, is what it's called, the document. As long as we do this within the inspection period, you will get that earnest money back. The deposit will come back to you. You can either pick it up from the title company or they will mail you a check. Just because you put that earnest money down does not mean it's gone if this deal doesn't work out. There's a few things that I always need to know when I am writing an offer for someone. The earnest money amount is number one. Number two is the desired closing date. So something that I typically do is I will ask the other agent first, does the seller have a desired closing date? Because sometimes that can make a difference in which offer they choose if there are multiple offers. I will go to that agent, ask them what the preferred closing date is of the seller. Does this work with your timeline? Typically the loan takes about 30 days, and so we can talk a little more about that. I just always like to choose a closing date wisely. The next part of the contract that I focus pretty heavily on is the inspection period. Typically I like to account for about 12 days, give or take. In different times of the year, when there's a lot of contracts being submitted, inspectors can get backed up. So it might take them a little longer, but typically it's about 10 to 15 days for the inspection period. If the offer is accepted, after the sellers sign the offer to put it into motion, we have 15 days from the effective date of the contract to get the inspection notice back to them. We have to have our inspections completed by the inspector, and then I write up a report based on the inspector's report on anything that we're going to negotiate to ask for if there are any issues that needs the seller's attention. Another thing that I use on the offer is I have to make sure to pay attention to what type of loan you're using, and so I can talk a little bit more about that. There are different types of loans. You have conventional, non-conventional, and then some people might not even need a loan. They might be making a cash offer. So all of these contingencies can impact the strength of your offer. So another document that I use sometimes that I think helps in a competitive offer is an escalation clause. As your realtor, I will put all these documents together, have you sign all of these documents. We'll put a deadline on the offer. Once we submit the offer to the other agent, and then they will take the offer to the seller. They might have multiple offers to review, and then they're going to go over all those offers with the seller and then decide which one they want to choose based on all the terms. So in this situation, let's say the sellers chose our offer because we wrote such a competitive and great offer. Once the offer is accepted, we are officially under contract. And at that point, I would send it to the lender to make sure they have all the information to start working on your loan.
I usually tell buyers that, we can start the loan application process, do all of their documentation, and then it's kind of just a waiting game until they officially get under contract. So once I receive that contract from the realtor, you guys are officially under contract, you're gonna buy this house, we would take that sales contract and then we would update our whole loan file based on all of the details of the contract. So the closing date that you've chosen, the price that was agreed by everybody, the earnest money amount that you're putting down, any different loan terms that are in the contract, any possible like seller credits that were listed in the contract. We'll put all of those numbers basically in your loan file to update your loan. And then at that point, we get with you about locking in your interest rate. We can typically lock in your interest rate once you're under contract on a home, up to 90 days, kind of depends. There are different options for extended rate lock as well. Most contracts I would say are within 30 to 75 days, somewhere in between there. Once you're under contract, then we would let you know what that day's interest rate is, what all of your loan terms look like based on all of the details of the contract. Once you've locked in your interest rate, then we are able to send you your loan disclosure paperwork. The majority of this can be e-signed. Most people do e-sign this, so it's really quick and easy on your phone or your computer. So in that loan disclosure paperwork, obviously you're going to receive your official loan estimate with all of those loan terms from the details of your contract, and then any applicable documentation for the specific loan program that you are obtaining. Once we have all updated documentation that we need from you, we might need updated pay stubs and bank statements depending on how long it's been since you applied for the loan versus going under contract. Then we would take all of that information and submit it in for processing and underwriting. At that point, our processor would review everything that we have in your loan file, make sure we're not missing anything. She might ask us some questions about different documents that are in the loan file, and then she will submit it into underwriting. Once your loan file is in the underwriting queue, it typically takes anywhere from 3 to 7 business days for the underwriter to review it. They will do a very detailed review of everything in the loan file and make sure that we're not missing anything. They'll really dive into the paperwork a lot more than the processor will. Just make sure there are no discrepancies or errors within your paperwork. Make sure things are making sense as far as, maybe like the monthly payments that you have on your credit report versus what's coming out of your bank statement every month. We'll do a lot of like checks and balances to make sure we have everything that we need. And then during that processing and underwriting portion, at some point during that time, you'll get with Jessica and start working on inspections and scheduling those.
This is the fun part, right? As soon as we go under contract, I'm going to be in contact with my preferred inspector, or I have a list of inspectors if you want to choose, you're always able to choose your own inspector. So basically, I'll be in touch with him about a date to get the inspection scheduled. There's an inspection contingency written in the offer, and so we have that many days to get an inspection notice to the seller. Within those days, hopefully, closer to the front end of that time period, the inspector will go out there and they will look over the entire house. There are specialist inspectors that sometimes we have to invoke. For example, for certain types of loans, you might have to have a termite inspection or a radon inspection. And if you're buying, a home out on some land, you might have a lagoon or a well that needs to be inspected. So the inspector is going to go out. He's going to look at the roof. He's going to go in the attic. He's going to look at every inch of this home, see if there are any issues in the home. And sometimes there are no major issues, which is great. Sometimes there are a lot. Sometimes you kind of expected there to be a lot. So this is when we can go and negotiate with the sellers to say, we had no idea that the air conditioning needed to be replaced or was not functioning, or maybe the fridge or dishwasher is broken. So we want to negotiate a little with the sellers to get some of those things paid for or covered.
Once you are through inspections and you're satisfied with what your inspection report looks like, how all of those negotiations went with Jessica, your agent, and the sellers, then we would typically order our appraisal as part of the loan process. So you do not order the appraisal, the lender always orders the appraisal. We have basically a pool of appraisers and they're just chosen at random. So we do not get to choose the appraiser. It's ordered through our system and then the random appraiser is chosen. They would go out to the property. They are not as thorough as an inspector. So an inspection, a home inspection is not required on any loan program. There is a termite inspection required on VA loans, but that's about it. I always still recommend an inspection. I think it's super important because that appraisal is not going to be super thorough. The appraiser is basically going to make sure with certain loan types, they're going to make sure that there's no major safety issues. The appraiser's main job is basically to determine the value of the property. So making sure that whatever you're paying for it, the home is worth at least that much. So the appraiser will give us the value. Sometimes if there are safety concerns, such as on a government loan, any peeling paint, missing stair railing, broken windows, things like that, the appraiser would point that out. Typically those do have to be fixed prior to closing. Basically they're going to give us a value of what that home is worth. If the house appraises more than what you're paying for it, that's awesome. You don't have to come up with anything extra. That basically just means that you have instant equity in the house. However, sometimes it can happen that the appraisal amount comes in lower than what you are paying for the house. And if you are getting a mortgage loan, that is a problem. At that point, you would get back with your agent. You kind of have a few options at that point. You can either ask the seller to come down to that lower amount that the house appraised at. In some instances, you can split the difference. So if it's $5,000 short, maybe you can put in $2,000, seller can put in $3,000. And depending on the contingencies in your contract, you could also just cancel the contract at that point and sign a mutual release like Jessica had talked about earlier. Once we are through the appraisal process, we're typically also done with processing and underwriting at that same point. So then we are ready for closing.
So it's kind of nice because once we get through inspection and appraisal, typically those are done within the first like 15 days. Then we might have another 15 days where we just kind of like sit back and relax. Once it's time, we meet at the closing table on the date that we specified on our offer. Typically what we'll do is that morning, or it depends on what time you schedule your closing for, but about an hour before closing, we go to the property and conduct a final walkthrough. So basically we're just walking through to make sure if there were items that we negotiated in the inspection period, that the sellers did fix those and provided receipts, those were completed. And we just are making sure that there's been no major issues with the home since the sellers have moved out, because they should be completely moved out at this point. So I want to make sure, you know, while they were moving a bed or something down the stairs, they didn't put a huge hole in the wall, or there wasn't a storm and a tree fell on the roof and now there's a hole in the roof. We want to make sure it's basically in the same condition as when we saw it at our first showing. We'll head straight to the title company and start the closing process.
So also before your closing, as your lender, I will let you know how much you need for your closing. Typically, if it's anything over like $1,000, $2,000, you will need a cashier's check for those funds. So you'll have to go to your bank to get a physical check, and you can also wire those funds to the title company if you prefer that. You'll need your check, and you'll also need your driver's license. The notary at the title company will take a copy of that. And then at the closing table, everybody just kind of gets together. Your lender should be there. They'll go over the paperwork for all of the loan with you. Everything's finalized. There's nothing going to change at this point. So you'll sign all of the closing documents, give your check to the title company closer, and then Jessica will give you your keys.
We have to say congratulations, you're now homeowner.